Hey folks, welcome back to Game Garbage, where we take a look at games, chat about the gaming news in the industry, and of course, stream for fun. Today we're doing a state of gaming. These are where I kind of do like deeper dives into the industry, or kind of like maybe broader topics of the gaming industry that affect a lot of us. And today it's actually digital rights management, also known as DRM. Now, we're going to go through what it is, and then we're going to go through some examples and ultimately show that regardless of what platform you're on, you really don't own anything, even getting to the point where you don't even own your console anymore, which is kind of insane. So let's go ahead and get into this. So it refers to the technology and processes used to control access and or use digital content. It's primarily aimed at protecting copyrights for digital media, including books, music, video, software. The whole purpose, again, is to restrict the copying and distribution of copyrighted works, allowing publishers to control their content by paying users. It's also used across various digital types, from entertainment media to sensitive business data, and it's also uses various tools and protection measures, such as access control technologies, to manage legal access to digital content. Overall, this is important. DRM plays a crucial role in safeguarding intellectual property in the digital age. So again, it's about safeguarding the IP for the company and the publisher or whoever else owns it. It's not really for the actual consumer. And in my opinion, this has really gotten out of control because this started in the early 2000s. Some of you probably listening to this don't even know what it was like, but you actually used to own everything. Okay, you went and bought physical cassettes and DVDs and VHSs for your movies and your DVDs, and then into Blu-ray. And then, and probably definitely at the end of the 2000s, we really started seeing it even in video games with like downloadable content and games becoming digital and all of this kind of stuff. Music was already going there. We also had the creation of Facebook and YouTube and MySpace and all of this other stuff where things were kind of more easily shared digitally. Now, a company should, of course, I believe, be able to protect its intellectual property and to make sure that they can make money off of it when they feel like they should. Again, it's their business, but I also think buyers such as you and me should be able to choose with our wallets whether we actually like the policies of a company or not compared to the rest of the competition that's out there. This is why I hate monopolies. That's why I think it's important to have a competition. So, one of the first things that most of us know is that ultimately the crew was taken offline, and this could even be given as like a single player game, but they didn't want to do it that way. They built it as a multiplayer, and pretty much a lot of these games are now built as multiplayers now. And Ubisoft basically shut off the servers, and then even though you had a physical disc or you had a digital game, right, that you paid for, you didn't actually own a product, they said. You just you just had a license or like the ability to access the game, and as soon as they shut off the servers, there was no way to gain access to the game anymore. Now, I'm not saying everybody is like going to want to continue to keep things going, or even asking for these companies to keep these servers on, because again, that's insanely expensive, and definitely gets expensive with all of the games that they make. So this is why like Stop Killing Games is not really asking necessarily for things to go that far for these companies, but they also can't necessarily, quote, sell us a product and then take it away whenever they want. And that's really what Stop Killing Games is going for, that you've probably heard in the news. And again, if you haven't signed that, if you're in the EU or in the UK, and you haven't signed it yet, make sure you actually sign it correctly. Otherwise, your signature isn't going to count. But you can actually still sign those at stoppedkillinggames.com. And it's pretty easy. You can sign up right there, sign the petition, and it's basically to work on getting things signed off so that the governments can finally look at the regulations and see about the consumer protection laws, so that we can actually own our products again. Because, lately we hadn't even been able to do that. Now, some games, of course, they've been given an offline mode, or sometimes the servers have been handed over, or even some older games like Battlefield, they allow you to rent a server from them per month, and then you can still actually play the game and enjoy it with friends or whatever. And you can rent it for as long as you want, basically, right? They flip it on when you are paying, and when you're done paying, they flip it back off. And so there's a lot of different avenues for this. And again, the publishers, they can do this because, again, they've already done this before. And they can at least create an offline mode. But something, too, that's getting crazy is like with this DRM and the end user license agreement is after Gearbox got bought by Take-Two Interactive, they updated the EULA, which was kind of insane. And they're basically expanding what they can have control over. And so, for clarification, for Borderlands games, and this includes the original one, this is going back all the way to Borderlands 1. If you boot up a game you haven't booted up for a while in Borderlands, the new user EULA will show up for you, and you'll have to basically sign it in order to play your single player offline game. Even if you're offline, you're going to have to do this, which is kind of insane. But anyway, of course, for bannable offenses, okay, like hacking and all that stuff, but even mods now at this point are a, quote, bannable offense. And then, of course, cheats and exploits, yeah, that's a given. We all understand that. But even using a VPN. So even like wanting to be able to protect yourself from a lot of malicious stuff out there, and even just with old games that are pretty much hackable, because again, they're not supported anymore, VPN is not necessarily a bad idea. But yeah, they don't even want you to use a VPN anymore. And this is kind of starting to cause some concern because, to a degree, it gives root access to your computer under the guise of, quote, anti-cheat software, and even including to access to the IP, personal information, network traffic, and pictures on your PC. Why the heck would they need to have access to your pictures? Now, of course, they deny a lot of this. There was a lot of review bombing for the game. As you can see right here, there was a massive ton of it, which is kind of insane. And, ultimately they said that, right here is that, the privacy policy identifies the data activities that may be collected, but this does not mean that every example is collected in each game or service. So they're saying, oh yeah, trust us, we're not doing it for everybody. We're not doing for absolutely everything, but they are admitting that they basically can access all of this stuff whenever they want for whoever they want on any game or service with this EULA agreement. And so they're saying, hey, trust us, we're not going to do anything nefarious. But again, we have other companies like EA or even Take-Two themselves or Ubisoft or Activision that have done things that are nefarious with user data that are against the laws in various countries, including even the United States. And so even this is kind of a mess, and it's just like they're just further gaining access to more stuff that they don't need. And then they're all putting it in the EULA agreement. And let's talk about Nintendo too, because they're not completely solo on this. And this article was written before the actual launch, and this unfortunately has gotten worse. But, Nintendo is pretty well known at this point for basically doing everything they can to protect their content. And so they've even attempted suing a Costa Rican supermarket over a trademark infringement, got multiple streamers banned for unforgivable crimes for playing a game they legally owned, which is crazy, and also struck down a sale of customs designed Joy-Cons in honor of a popular deceased YouTuber. And again, they don't necessarily care. It's all about protecting their brand. And I think that's very, very clear now with the Switch 2, because now we're at a point where in their EULA agreement, it says that you acknowledge that if you fail to comply with the foregoing restrictions, Nintendo may render the Nintendo Access services and or applicable Nintendo device, like your console, permanently unusable in whole or in part. So basically, they can do whatever they want and make it permanently bricked. And some of these bricked consoles, whether you use the MIG switch, whether you were banned because of an inappropriate name, like Twinkie Link, which is so unfortunate, or even soft modding your game or your console in some degree, like putting lights in your console. I wouldn't suggest doing that because it's not going to be recognized. And this also opens up to other third-party stuff too, which is going to be pretty interesting. But yeah, it's so restrictive that they can permanently brick your console. And some of the Switch 2s, they are permanently bricked. They're being sold at GameStop, so they're being sold at other retailers that have a used Switch 2 for sale, and then the person buys it and takes it home, and they're reporting, hey, it's bricked, I can't connect to the internet, I have this, someone else's profile that can't be removed, the thing can't be factory reset. It's incredibly ridiculous and frustrating, and this is ultimately what's happening. And again, does Nintendo necessarily have the incentive, the financial incentive, to unbrick these consoles like they could? No, of course not. They want you to go buy another one for $450, which of course, if you're in, Canada, the prices already went up for you for the Switch 1s over there and all of the Switch 1 games and accessories, which is crazy. And yeah, who's to say that's not going to happen for the Switch 2? Later in this decade as, tariffs start to come back and all of that jazz. And so this is becoming more of a problem. And like the Nintendo console, the Switch 2 is probably the most restrictive console we've ever had in the market. And something too with their user agreement with their digital rights management is that they're basically helping you to agree, making you to agree if they want to use your stuff, use their stuff, excuse me, that you don't have access to class action lawsuits. You can't take them to court. The only thing that you have is arbitration by them through the company. And ultimately, that really puts them in a better spot. It also makes it a lot more cost effective. And so, if you continue to have issues like a swelling battery in your Switch 2, or if you have Joy-Cons that are drifting, they can basically just give you the finger and there's nothing you can do about it. Just go buy some more. Why not? Again, the console's only $450 and it's $95 for the Joy-Cons, and it's insane for anybody actually defending any of this garbage because again, it's putting the complete control into the hands of the company. And again, companies can choose to do this, but again, also people such as myself can choose whether to fork over our money or not. Because when I buy a product, I expect to be able, within reason, to be able to do what I want with it as long as it's not breaking the law. But they're creating their own sets of laws through the EULA, like Take-Two with Gearbox, like Nintendo with their EULA, and then even taking a look at Steam. Valve has even said explicitly disclosing now that you don't actually own your games when you buy them from the Steam Online store. And it's the same issue for PlayStation, it's the same issue for Xbox or Nintendo or wherever else. You don't actually own it. Now, there is a storefront, the GOG, which is actually pretty cool. Let me actually pull this up real quick. So we have something called Good Old Games. And you can actually click on these, and this is a whole idea basically to ensure that you're actually given a packet file so that you can boot up the game yourself, that you don't need to connect or rely on online servers or connections or anything. You can actually just boot it up like every game in the old days. And this list keeps growing over time, but they actually continue to support these over time, which is really nice. And again, you actually just own these. Again, they're just digital, but you actually do own these. You're not just buying a license. You're actually buying the files and giving a little packet to actually boot up the game, just like the old stuff. So take a look at GOG every once in a while. See what they got in there for their good old games. Because, yeah, they do actually have devs that make it so that these games can be supported completely offline, which is wonderful. And again, that should be something that we enjoy. But like DRM, while it's been something to actually protect companies, and it should protect intellectual property, excuse me. Piracy, I don't technically agree with. Okay, I don't like it, but again, it's like I totally understand the other side of the argument that if people can't really own their stuff anymore, and again, these companies and publishers, whether it's music, movies, or whatever else, just like when Sony canned Crunchyroll, people's entire digital libraries that they built over years or even a decade just completely vaporized. And that's awful. That should never happen because, again, you're not actually buying a product. So let this also be a warning with how things are today, is that when you're actually buying something digital, you don't actually own it. It's not yours. It's the company, and they basically give you a NFT to allow you access to the thing that you bought. So you buy a license, really. You don't actually buy the product. You just buy a license or like a receipt that you paid for it, that you paid for the access, and then they allow you to watch it. But as soon as those servers go offline, and this is the current issue too with Nintendo Switch 2 with all of the third-party stuff, that all of the games are basically online except for like I think like Rune Factory and Cyberpunk 2077. Those games are actually all filed right on the cartridge, but like the rest of them, pretty much, it's all just a digital license that's on that cartridge, and then you got to hook up to the internet and be able to download it for yourself. And again, when those servers go offline, those aren't going to be accessible anymore. And eventually that's going to happen. And we've had storefronts too, like the Wii U or like the Nintendo or like the Xbox 360 or even like the PlayStation 2 or 3 stores, they're not supported anymore. And eventually the publishers just take them offline. And again, I agree that publishers and companies should not have to support stuff that is not profitable for them. But I also don't think that they should just take things away whenever they deem necessary with no recourse for the customer. Because maybe the customer actually wants to keep that for someone like me. And like looking at all of my physical games that I have, again, a lot of those don't actually have all of the files on the disc. They're just a license. But when I look at all of my movies and my TV shows, all of the data is actually on there. And there's nothing that any of those companies can do to take that away from me or away from my wife. And that's how it should be. That's what it used to be like. But like this digital rights management, it's gotten so completely out of control and no one is safe from this. And again, it just rings true that the saying, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. But again, these publishers, these companies, they're able to control everything. And their control, in my opinion, is just getting worse and worse with examples like Borderlands and also, too, with Nintendo. I mean, we're getting to a point where it is getting out of control. And I mean, what's going to be next if they're already getting our IPs, our pictures, access to stuff, and we can't use mods, we can't soft mod our consoles with like lights, for example, or we can't do anything else, or they're even locking us out of being able to be a part of lawsuits, to file law, or be a part of class actions. Like, what's next? What else can they take away? And I think that's something that's careful to consider. So yeah, in most cases, I wait, if it's especially digital, I wait for a sale to buy my game or my music or whatever. But yeah, we are getting to a point where everything is just going to be completely digital anyway. And I think this really is going to be the last generation where we're going to have that. I'm not sure if PlayStation 6 is really going to have a lot of true physical. We'll have to see. I could totally be wrong on that. We'll see, too, if there's a disc drive also for PlayStation 6 and the next Xbox hybrid. But yeah, we'll have to see. But this is becoming a mess. And not everybody knows about this. And this is why, too, I think it's important for people to look into Stop Killing Games. This is why Stop Killing Games exists. And we're at 1.3 million now, and there's still more signatures pouring in. And again, in my opinion, the more the better, because games are basically sold and represented as a good, not as a service. But the publishers, they treat them like a service, and they just take it away whenever they want. And then there's nothing we can do about it. Same with Anthem right now. They're going to shut it down, and some people still actually like that game. Some people play it, but even though you have a physical disc, it doesn't mean anything because the servers are going offline. And I think at least even some single-player games, they require an online connection, which, again, I think is insane. And they want to constantly ping on how you're playing, what you're doing in the game. And again, they're basically using that data to continue to market to you, to manipulate you to buy more stuff. But, where are the rights for the consumer? That is really kind of disappearing. And we'll see what happens with Nintendo. I mean, right now with the Switch 2, with how restrictive they're being on their Nintendo Switch right now and bricking consoles and what they're bricking them for, Brazil has actually filed. And so Nintendo has to respond, I think, within about 2 weeks from now. So we'll see what happens. So with that, folks, thanks for tuning in. You can always follow me at Gaming Garbage 22 over at YouTube. We've also got a playlist of different types of stuff there that we do on the channel, including reviews and initial looks when we can get to them, and also playthroughs of different stuff. And then you can also follow me at Twitch, also at Don't Turn On The, if you'd like. When I play games, I'll chat with you in the chat. And with that, folks, I'll see you guys on the next one.